Okay, all good. Well, I've joined today by Romans Ivanons of Rio Media. Romans, first question: have you recovered from our weekend?
Yeah, we'll see. It's still the process of recovery. I managed to I managed to go to the gym today, so it's an achievement of itself.
For those who don't know, Romans actually stayed at my place and we went to see Peggy Goo in Liverpool, which was fun. But that's another story for another day. Today, we're here to talk about the current landscape in Facebook ads, and we're going to dive straight into the first topic. What is the problem with ROAS, aka return on ad spend? So, Romans, let's just set the frame on this, right? Like, typically, how is ROAS being used to measure success of ads by agencies, and what's the problem with it today, and why does it not work anymore the same way it may have used to?
Mm. Yeah, I guess back in the day, 2018, maybe even 2019, um, paid media agencies could scale brands relatively, I wouldn't say easy, but in a more straightforward way, looking um, just looking at Facebook ad account and looking at ROAS, because obviously back in the day, in the pre-iOS era, it was relatively easy, and you didn't need to analyze data. You didn't need to have data specialists. You didn't need to look into the overall strategy. You just needed to be really, really, really good at understanding what creatives worked, and be quite good at media buying. That's it. And it obviously um, breeded a lot of um, agencies that started thinking in a copy paste approach. That that this is the way, and and I still see agencies that still think in that way. We have a lot of the clients that come to us that have been burned, which is no longer a surprise to us, by other agencies that would either promise, or they would create some sort of plan for the media buying strategy, but it'd be just um, it would be based on what used to work in a day. And it's quite unfortunate, because we moved on long time ago, and marketing is a quite dynamic space. So um, uh, I anticipate that a lot of the agencies, paid media, it seems that still will still think that that's the only way of driving business. They most probably stand a no chance in the future.
So, why did it used to work, I suppose? Like, what's changed in particular? So, we'll start on
Mm.
like a high level first, right? Like, obviously, Facebook, it was probably the CAC was a lot lower and it was more profitable to acquire customers. Has that been the fundamental change, or is it just that using this as a KPI is flawed as a methodology?
Actually, both, and even more than that, coupled with iOS changes. Obviously, we're not going to dive into that because it's a rabbit hole of itself. But yeah, I think it's the fact that the ecosystem, the e-commerce ecosystem, wasn't. Now it's kind of been developing and it's maturing right now, and more people trying to get into data analysis, and trying to understand unit economics, and do it the right way. Back in the day, you didn't need to do that, so therefore it was relatively easy to scale. But if we dive into the metric itself, um, if you compare a typical D2C brand to any other business which isn't online, which requires thinking in terms of data and unit economics. Typically a mature business would have someone understanding how things work and how different objectives um, correlate with each other. Why should certain market activities exist? you kind of need to back it up with some data numbers, and not just look at Facebook ads or Google ads and say we're winning. You'd need to have like some sort of overall idea of what's going on, and plus all of the competition. A lot of the beauty brands, we've worked with a lot of beauty, mainly probably 70% of our clients are either beauty or apparel brands, and the competition, the saturation is very high now. You have to figure out different ways to market yourself. You got to be smart. You have to be efficient, and therefore more competition means obviously less advertising space, and therefore customer acquisition cost goes up. And now you need to start paying attention to blended metrics. Yeah.
So if we're going to disregard ROAS, then what would be a better solution forwards? Going forward?
I would say no need to disregard isolated ROAS entirely. It's still good to have an idea how a certain channel performs on its own, but what we started looking at is multiple metrics depending on the brand, of course, but there's ROAS or MER, media efficiency ratio. Obviously it's not applied to startups. If you're anywhere under 1 million in yearly revenue, MER or ROAS, which means it's basically you look at your blended ROAS that you get from all of your channels, and you divide it by the ad spends, and you get your sort of a blended metric. For early stage D2C brands, it's obviously difficult. Like you can't really make a solid judgments. But for more mature brands, it's the way to go. Plus, sometimes we look at customer acquisition costs or blended customer acquisition costs to judge the success of overall marketing performance. But the thing is, it requires you to take into account so many different things, not just advertising. You, as a marketer, you would need to look at retention. You need to look at how acquisition feeds retention. You need to understand, like for example, we're getting deeper into P&L of our clients. If we do different type of deals, obviously, if we see that we can contribute more to the business, I've made it a requirement for us to look at P&L and understand how different market channels impact profitability of the business. So the different levels, the different metrics and different levels, I guess, of how advanced you want to go in terms of understanding your business. It really depends on where you're at. But yeah, I would say to start with blended ROAS and blended customer acquisition costs.
Confirmed. Do you think that's frustrating for a lot of brands? Because this is something I hear as well as a kickback to us. Well, I can't gauge the effectiveness of a particular channel if I'm going to follow that approach. What would you respond to that? Well, what's the solution? Is it to implement post-purchase surveys, or is it just to get over that OCD, maybe obsession and look at things holistically?
Yeah, it is frustrating. To be honest, I have no answer to this. I'm dealing with different type of clients, and the only solution that I found is education. As an agency, I created a slightly different offer for those who when we work with clients, we try to pay attention to how they think about growing their business. If they're not involved, if they're not really involved in the marketing and they're not interested in understanding how marketing works, then I can't really help. I can't really make someone want to understand things at a deeper level. I'm not there. I'm not there to teach business. All I can do is to kind of allow them to to bringing a new perspective on how things are supposed to be done, and doing it sort of in a logical manner. And if you're a brand and you're thinking how can I look at my D2C business or e-commerce business from a holistic point of view, I think it's a good starting point is to start talking to people who seem to understand what they're talking about.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think before it was very fragmented. Like last few years, you had actually agencies even competing against each other, where you would have the Facebook team and the email team, and then one or the other would say, you need to invest more into email, you need to invest more into Facebook, you need to invest more into TikTok, Pinterest, Google, and everyone would almost compete for the client's share of their sort of allocated marketing spend and say their channel was more effective than the other. Whereas now, I think everyone realizes they're sort of dependent on each other and they need to prop up the whole ecosystem together. So that compartmentalized approach isn't working because actually, as you said, everyone realizes that there's just so many touch points as well that they need to work together. And obviously, if you are losing tracking and attribution, then it sort of becomes a necessity rather than something like a nice to have.
Yes, agreed, 100%. It's it's. I think it's also it's a mindset shift for a lot of brands to make about what marketing activities should they include internally, and what should they outsource to externally to agencies, and how these agencies should work together. Because you and me, we agree on the fact that if you work together cohesively, and agencies understand why they're doing it, why they're doing certain things, what they're trying to achieve, and if they're on the same page, it's better for everyone. But it's a mindset shift. When I talk to startup brands, they're still trying to make decisions based on short-term metrics, whether it's isolated ROAS, or they have no clue why subscription rate or subscription to purchase rate actually matters. They completely disregard that part of the funnel. But then when you come to a point where you actually want to kind of explain the situation, why it matters, and why it matters for both for customer acquisition and both the email, those who kind of understand that, actually it doesn't matter. You don't want to drive traffic to convert on the first touch point. You want to drive traffic and make sure that your marketing funnel is aligned with the customer journey. And there's, as you said, there is so much needs to take place in order to align your marketing funnel with what the customer is comfortable with, and that requires a more collaborative approach to work.
Let's move on to the next one. Got a few comments. This is definitely Juliana stuff. Yeah, you can tell.
Attention to the answer. Let's do a quiz. What's more important? Attention on the customer acquisition.
Yeah, 80-20 rule, remember. 80-20, when all else fails, just say the 80-20 rule. So the next topic we said we were going to discuss, and this is something that's quite pervasive in the industry, is that you need to ramp up the velocity of testing your creatives. And this was sort of a reaction to, wasn't it, the iOS? It's like, what should we do? Well, you should test more creatives. And there was a lot of pushback where people said, actually, well, you should be testing creatives anyway. Why all of a sudden do you need to test more creatives? Fundamentally, what would necessitate people having to require more testing more creatives? It seems like someone was trying to patch over something that didn't really know the answer to, in my opinion, and I just couldn't understand the logic behind that. So why is it necessary to test a high volume of ad creatives in response to these changes?
I don't understand why. And to be quite honest, I was a bit disappointed. Well, it's not like I was looking for a clear answer from marketers and agencies that I kind of look up to. I'm still looking up to them, but I also I've also seen and heard them talking about the fact that just let's double down on the creative. Let's make sure the creatives are even better. We test more of them, and I guess for someone who I think it's got its place. Yeah, if your creative isn't good, then you need to make a better one. But there has to be a reason. There has to be objective for why you should be doing it, and how do you measure success for creative, and so on and so forth. But I agree with you. I think this advice is based on again on short term thinking, and not willingness to dive deeper into the business itself, and why that, how can we solve that problem differently? What actually matters when it comes to scaling, growing an e-commerce business profitably? Why do we need more creators? What's the philosophy behind it? If we're going to test more creators, we need to we need to hire a creative agency, or we need to develop internally something like a creative engine that takes resources, that's time, labor, people. Why should we invest in that? Whereas maybe we can look into the data a little bit better, understand what we can do with our existing data, and what data we actually need to collect from our customers. Is it that we need maybe to install multi-step pop-ups and collect data that way? Maybe we need to send post-purchase surveys, and dig deeper into who's our ideal audience, and what type of quality audience we want to focus on, and solve that problem from a different perspective. But again, testing more creatives is, I found it's not usually the answer to the problem. When you at scale, when you're probably spending relatively large budgets on Facebook ads or TikTok ads. Well, actually, when it comes to TikTok, you need to have a lot of creatives because of the nature of the platform. You need to be constantly testing, and it's kind of tricky to say to understand which creatives would stick. Also, TikTok doesn't really give you a lot of the data and analytics on what works well. Where with Facebook, it takes place, but I don't think it's the answer at all.
It's a weird one, isn't it? Because I'm not trying to bash ads agencies, by the way. I think a lot of them actually really care and have tried hard to find solutions. And I've actually seen like a lot of intelligent conversation on LinkedIn, Twitter as well, of how people are trying to navigate around the choppy waters. And it just seems strange. There's a loss of data and like lack of attribution. So why is the solution to ramp up testing velocity of creatives? It doesn't seem to make sense to the fundamental problem, which, as you said, people are not able to understand the return that they're spending on the ads. So why do we need to ramp up creative testing to counteract that? It doesn't seem like it makes sense.
I mean, it's like if you run a different type of business. Let's say we're not running an e-commerce business, could be anything else really. Why would I need to put in more money into advertising or testing different creatives if I don't truly understand my fundamentals, if I don't know what actually brings a return on investment, if I don't know much about my customer, if I don't utilize the other channels to bring in customers. There are so many ways we can solve that solution, or we can start approaching this problem. Why to double down and triple down on something that actually takes a lot of resources, a lot of analysis, and if you run, if you're extensively running creative tests, you need to do it in a scientific way if you want to, just like conversion rate optimization. You need to analyze different parts of your creatives. There are influencers, UGCs, different placements. It's a bit of a headache to even organize this process on its own. But when you start to scaling it, it becomes even more difficult. So I would typically I would argue against it unless there are processes in place. We know why we're doing it. The clear data shows us what to do, and we know that it's not going to become a mess when we start scaling the creative testing.
Interesting thoughts, mate. Interesting thoughts. So let's end this on a summary of what we think would be an effective way to move forwards based on all the things we've talked about. What would be a message to people running Facebook ads at the moment to overcome these issues? What's the solution, or at least what's part of it?
Sit back, take a I guess, chill a little bit with creative testing and trying to run through different agencies or different media buyers, or try and find the shortcuts to the growth or scalability of your business. As I already mentioned, what I would always do, I sit with different marketers or different brands and try to question how they do things and why they do them in the first place. The best place to start is start having conversations with people who are actively growing brands, or who help grow brands, like, for example, agencies. But start with fundamentals, because it sounds like a cliche, but most brands miss that part dramatically. They don't pay attention to even unit economics. So as an agency, we sometimes know that business is better and they're paying out better than they do, which is quite surprising. As a business owner, you should, at least someone has to be responsible for that. Start with understanding the numbers and start developing a good reasoning for why you should allocate different resources across your marketing channels, in what way and what priority. I think it's quite logical. Maybe this is how I think typically, but in a very sort of logical, rational approach. And I was trying to detach myself from the situation, or from the brand that I'm working with, and I try to find similar examples of businesses that solve this problem that exists outside of e-commerce, essentially.
Yeah.
It's one of the ways of doing it. Yeah.
So don't panic. Hire real media and give all the money to Romans. That's the solution.
I was subconsciously putting that seed in everyone's heads.
Cool, mate. Well, we're going to end it. Yeah, thank you for your time. If anyone's got any other questions, I can see the comments flooded with a bit of back and forth, a lot of banter.
I think it's all Juliana talking to.
Of course it is, yeah. There's a few of us joining in, but mostly Juliana, of course. Feel free to post your questions, Romans, and I'm sure he will get back to you. But otherwise, going to end things here. Thank you for your time once again, mate.
Thank you for having me. All the best.